Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse, our pre-holiday edition, alongside Mr. Martin Popoff, as always. Good morning, my friend.
Yes. Yes. Ho, ho, ho. Christmas is upon us. Snow is upon us here in Toronto. I'm
Yep,
sporting my Sea of Tranquility today.
there
So,
you go. Very
running
cool.
some errands, doing some shopping and stuff. So,
Still got shopping to do, huh?
oh, yeah, most of it.
Yeah, you're like me. I find though, man, I can't deal with going out to stores anymore. So I do most of my stuff online,
Yeah.
if I can. And usually I wait till like a couple days before anything that I haven't been able to get. I'll run out somewhere and
Yeah.
just pick up
Yeah.
a few things. But yeah, it's man, it's cold and winter in the Hudson Valley here in New York. I think with the snow you're getting now, we're getting in a couple hours.
Mhm.
So, but it's 20 something degrees here. It's cold and chilly. It's gray. It's dark. It's like,
Yeah.
man, winter is here. No more this fake summer fall thing we've gotten here and there. Now winter is officially upon us. And with winter officially upon us, we're gonna dip into the seasons of wither, I guess, and we're gonna talk about Aerosmith today. And it's actually funny for those of you who watched Guitar Hack last night. We had actually planned to do this Aerosmith song show, and for some reason, again, I've been sick for like almost 3 weeks, so it's like my perception of reality seems to be kind of off at times. But I thought we agreed to do a top 10 Aerosmith songs in general, but then Martin was like, no, 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 remember, we're doing it from the 90s onwards. And I'm like, oh, crap, did I miss that part of it? How do you
Yeah.
miss that part of it? Because that's like the main part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So last night I scrambled and said, "Okay, I can do this." And as I was telling Martin before we went live here this morning, I think it was almost easier to pick like my 10 favorite songs from the more recent era of Aerosmith than trying to figure out a top 10 from the classic era because there's so many great songs from back then. But it just goes to show you the difference in the quality of the albums, right? It's like I think for me,
Oh, yeah.
the good songs really stick out on these more recent albums as opposed to the older albums where you had lots and lots and lots of really great songs. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So, how many we want to do? Do two at a time, Martin? What do you think?
Okay, let's do two at a time. Yeah, this was a little tough for me because I just tried to articulate this many times before, but Aerosmith and Def Leppard are the two bands where they just seem to cross this threshold into a place where there's just a ceiling. I've lost confidence in the band. No matter what they do, there's just a ceiling of like a 7.5 out of 10 on anything that they're doing because I worry about the motivations. It's almost like, are these songs only here because you've got so many ballads and poppy things and experiments and trying to be current and all that kind of stuff and lots of overproduction and stuff. So it was kind of tough. And yeah, officially, like what we're doing is no pump or previous,
Get a
and
grip. Go
moving on
from.
from there. Yeah, get a grip and whatnot. So yeah, my first one I went with "Oh Yeah," which is a kind of like a funky, stonesy, almost New York Dollsy sort of song. It's funny when this isn't Joe Perry singing, but when Joe Perry sings a song and other parts of the catalog, they seem to occasionally go back to reminding me of a bit of a New York Dolls vibe. And even back in the Lever Kreb days, Lever Krebs actually had the New York Dolls on as part of their early stable when they had Aerosmith as well. So, those guys for a brief period, along with Kiss, we're kind of competitors at the same level, sort of thing, right? And so I do feel you get a little bit of a New York Dolls vibe from this. It's from music from another dimension, and my copy is in another dimension. I can't find it because it was oversized. You and I have talked about this before. I noticed my Paul McCartney memory almost full is stored with my DVDs because it's oversized, right? And I don't know how my music from another dimension went missing, but yeah, it's gone missing. So that's my first one. My second one, whole different story. Back to Get a Grip for Living on the Edge. When this song came out, I've got it kind of low here. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be higher for you. Maybe it's not even on your list. But it's the kind of song that it's ambitious, it's long, it's got a lot of parts. It does worm its way into your ears. Aerosmith, even we can argue whether they're writing any good hooks or how many good hooks during this modern era, but they're definitely writing hooks whether you want them or not. And I think this has some hooks. it's a little different. It's experimental. I give them that. It's got the kind of acoustic thing. It's a little socially conscious, that kind of thing. So I wanted to somewhat reward it for being something they'd never done before, ever. I mean, they've never really tried to do a song like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. So, oh yeah, from the very last Aerosmith album and last that we're going to see, because I think they're pretty much retired, and Living on the Edge from the first on our list. There you go.
Can we safely say more on that later?
Okay.
So, yeah. This is an interesting assignment because this is a era of the band that I have gone on record many, many times and say I'm really not a fan of. And in scrambling to redo this last night and re-listening to these albums again, I think my issue with a lot of more modern Aerosmith is I don't really care for the ballads and the big hits for the most part. I like Aerosmith when they're doing Aerosmithy kind of things. And, I know that there's this whole concept of bands wanting to progress and fans wanting bands to progress. But sometimes a band is really good at doing what they're really, really good at. And I find that the songs that I gravitate towards on these more recent albums are ones that sound like the Aerosmith that I grew up with, that I've always liked. And I think they can still do that on occasion, right? But you have to wonder if whether it's the record company or whether it's Steven Tyler or whatever the influence is that's telling them that we need to work with outside writers, we have to do ballads, we have to do big hit singles instead of just doing kick-ass Aerosmith stuff, right? Because that's what so many of us who grew up with this band want to hear. And I fully understand the people who came on board with Aerosmith in the late 80s and the early 90s. They don't really have that. They're not stuck in that ditch, right? Which is fine. For me, my number 10, I'm going to go to Just Push Play, which is an album I really don't care for all that much, but I'm going to go with Under My Skin. Again, it's got the elements that I like from Aerosmith. It's got the heavy grinding riffs. There's lots of groove. You got Tyler doing that kind of playful vocal, and then the chorus has like this weird little Beatles quality to it. I'm kind of liking that. So it's kind of like this meeting of a couple of worlds here, which I think is really good. Unfortunately, I think the rest of that album for me just doesn't really work. That's a really good song. I dig it. That's my number 10. My number 9 is going to be Crash from Nine Lives. Nine Lives again, to me, a spotty album, but there's some good stuff on there. This is Aerosmith doing that kind of frantic, raucous, sleazy hard rock. That's what they're good at. Lots of energy, a lot of blazing guitars. And again, Tyler, I will say throughout all of this catalog and specifically the era that we're talking about here, regardless of what we feel about the songwriting or the production or the outside writers and blah, 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 too many ballads, generally speaking, Steven Tyler always sounds really, really good. And I always find a lot to like from what he's doing, regardless of what I feel about the songs and the albums themselves. I think he sounds great on Crash. Really, really good. And actually throughout most of Nine Lives. So yeah, that's my first two, Under My Skin from Just Push Play and Crash from Nine Lives.
All right. I mean, look at that '90s photo. Eh?
Oh
Everything
yeah.
about it, the colors, the tinting, everything. It just screams '90s, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's funny you mention the Beatles because I don't like when I hear any Beatles in Aerosmith. And the other thing that they do that so many hair bands did at the time is the Norwegian Wood psychedelic Beatles thing. They do that way too much, right? And and you also hear the new country melodies. And if you're gonna mention new country, and hard alternative or whatever, it's kind of Nickelback melodies here and there too, right? And so that kind of stuff is really annoying when in these songs that we don't like very much. Okay, so next, number 8, I've got Walk on Water from Big Ones. This is a compilation. So they've got dribs and drabs of little songs along the way, and I wanted to go check those out to see what there was. And so the idea here, this is a pretty heavy one, and it's got this cool kind of monotone vocal that Steven does, which is kind of different. I thought Deuces Are Wild immediately, but it's actually disqualified because it's recorded in '89 or and then Blind Man is just another one of these southerny ballad things. So there's 3 new songs on here, right? But yeah, I thought Walk on Water, which opens the album, like I say, hits compilation is really quite heavy. It's got the harmonica in it. It's got massive sound. That's the other thing that's to the detriment of Aerosmith at this time. It's just way too many layers of stuff, right? Yeah, and then Joe Perry, as we've discussed many times. I mean, I there's a positive and a negative to this, but I've read interviews where he said like I just really are searching. He's not so much a tone chaser, but a gimmicky sound chaser. I'm looking for different sounds to do, and you hear that throughout Aerosmith albums where he's just experimenting with different guitar sounds just to be different, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And that's usually not a great motivation, right? So that's my number 8, and then it's back to Get a Grip for Line Up, which is a good kind of honky tonk metal kind of one. It sticks in your brain. It's got a really good stomp to it, kind of thing. And I was kind of thinking this whole idea of the ceiling, where with Def Leppard it just drops. It drops from a very high level with Pyromania, because I really like that album a lot more over years. Drops down to like there's maybe a 2 out of 10 ceiling on any songs past that era, right? It just drops a lot, right? So I know your views on 80s Aerosmith, right? And I'm like only finding about a sort of like a 20% problem with 80s Aerosmith. I'm well on board, but when it gets to this era, it's almost like Just Get a Grip and Nine Lives, because Nine Lives, you've got the label change, and it just seems like it's a little rawer and a little more rocking out. It sounds maybe a little more like Pump as an album. Um, but then there's a big drop, and then at that point it's truly into the Def Leppard drop, where I'm super skeptical of anything they're doing or why they're doing it, or how many committees came up with, we got to come up with a super rocking song at this point, right? Rather than the proper motivation. So there you go. A Walk on Water and Line Up and a little more context.
There you go. Yeah, I totally get you about some of the more recent stuff. It's like even the songs that are kind of rocking like we want them to rock, they're just not very good.
Mm-hmm.
Songs have to be good in the end, right?
Yeah.
My number 8 is title track to Get a Grip, which, let's spoiler alert, this is to me the most solid album of this entire time period we're talking about. I think this is actually some very good songs on here. It's got lots of dirty guitar licks. I totally get what you're saying about Joe Perry, like trying all these different things all the time. Do you find it like distracting at times
Oh
almost?
yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like, I don't know, sometimes less is more, guys, and Perry and Whitford, that was always their deal. And I think that's what really works. And you can totally tell when Joe is trying all these weird little things. I'm just kind of like, geez, just stop already. But anyway, back to Get a Grip. Some nice, just dirty, nasty guitar licks in there. It's pretty groovy. It's marginally heavy. And I think Tyler's vocals are spot on this song. I think when he's jacked up with loads of piss and vinegar, that's the Steven Tyler I want to hear. And really, really good song. So Get a Grip is my number 8. And number 7, I'm going to go back to Nine Lives for Taste of India, which again, kind of like Living on the Edge. I think Taste of India is a really different song for them. And it's almost got this kind of like Led Zeppelin quality to it. It's kind of got this mystical, magical chugging riff. And then Tyler's kind of like his vocals weave in and out of the mix. They have this kind of like dreamy quality, but they still sound like him. Really, really intriguing song. Very, very different. And I would have liked to have heard them do a little bit more of something like that. But it kind of sticks out on that album as something really, really different, really, really unique, and I kind of dig it. So
Yeah.
yeah, Get a Grip and Taste of India.
Cool. And building on what you said about the guitars, I feel the same thing about Joey Kramer, where sometimes it's just like, is that a snare drum? I don't know what that is. Is it electronic? Is that a bass drum? There's a lot of no hi-hat or cymbals, and then there's just noisy cymbals
very
everywhere.
boxy sounding and like
fakey cymbals. Hi-hat just seems normal. Hi-hat seems to be non-existent, kind of thing. So and even Steven, the funny thing about Steven is, yeah, he sounds great, but so often you'll be hearing like a very subtly doubled vocal. Maybe he'll put a little harmony on or something. I mean, even with him, you're kind of distracted that he's doing things with his voice as he goes on. But I will agree with you. I've got Get a Grip, the title track, as my number 6. And yeah, it's a he turns in this really cool scatty vocal. It's classic Aerosmith writing. This is the kind of song that you fantasize that if it would have had a Rocks production on it and the Rocks number of layers, I mean, would have loved it even more. But it is huge. They do it is really big, but it's funky. And then also Flesh from that album with the riff, the chorus. I don't like the chorus. It's oversold with the big scream, Flash, that whole thing. I don't like that. But I love the verse with that. The day rolls in, day rolls out, night rolls out. It's got a cool verse. And that's the other thing. We say the songs aren't very good. They gotta have good songs, right? And the funny thing about these songs is that they're you could tell that the effort is there. They've worked on them really hard. There's a lot of interesting chord changes and all that stuff. So on some weird objective level, the songs are really, really good. It's almost like, when I used to say, Physical Graffiti is the aircraft carrier of Led Zeppelin albums, right? Every single one of these Aerosmith songs is an aircraft carrier, right? It's just this massive, considered, overworked thing in all departments kind of thing. But when it comes to the songwriting, like I had in my honorable mentions, Falling in Love is Hard on the Knees, there's just interesting music in that song, right? It's just kind of well put together. So, but still, you just lose confidence in them. You think about the committee and the outside songwriters and stuff, so you're not really particularly on board. So, anyways, Get a Grip and Flesh, both from Get a Grip.
Yeah, it's like you're wondering, like, well, what audience are you pandering to here, right?
Yeah,
because you have there's two, right? There's the old school fans, and then there's ones who are the more new school. And I'm sure they don't mind all these layers and all this stuff going on where the rest, some of the rest of us want them just to kind of like get back to basics and do what you do best. Yeah. All right. My number six, also Flesh from Get a Grip.
okay.
Everything you said, I agree with. There's a lot of guitar thunder on here. Yeah, the chorus is not great, but leading up to it is really, really good. And I think Tyler just sounds great on the song. And there's lots of guitar. Always like lots of guitar on these songs. So that's my number six. My number five is the one and only song I'm going to pick from Music from Another Dimension, and that is Legendary Child. I think it's a fun song. There's the hook on the chorus is great. There's loads of guitars. You got heavy riffs. You got these kind of like slashing leads. You got slide guitar, a little bit of everything, which is okay. And it has to me that old school Aerosmith signature groove, which I really like. I mean, that the songs for me on my list that really work for me have that kind of chunka nasty groove that they always did so well. Too bad the rest of the album for me is really lacking in anything kind of like this. But yeah, that's my number six and five: Flesh from Get a Grip and Legendary Child from Music from Another Dimension.
Okay. Well, next I'm going with Something's Gotta Give from Nine Lives. This is a really heavy one, rocking upper mid tempo sort of thing. You could tell like they're just pouring all this is not a commercial song into it, right? And just saying like this is for our our street cred kind of thing. You got Bell of who remembers any good like Bell of a Ride cymbal. You've got that in here as well. You got kind of regular hi-hat going on. It's got a cool chorus, so that's a good one as well. And it brings up an interesting point about these albums, right? And that whole weird conversation we have about albums being too long or whatever, right? There are certain albums, generally speaking, when you complain about an album, you want to switch out some tracks and do this and that with them sort of thing. But the funny thing with these albums is you could just delete 3 or 4 songs and turn it into a really good album, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
And
right?
It's still going to be a fairly long album because it just goes on and on and on and on kind of thing, right? Okay, so number 3, I went with Shut Up and Dance from Get a Grip. That's just another one that is always just stuck in my head. And I love your point about reminding you of the old Aerosmith, because I think there's a theme with mine as well that go to the exact same place. But I can hear this song on Permanent Vacation or Pump. I mean, it really sounds like when they're doing a pretty darn good job. Like I say, I like both those albums, right? So I can hear this song on that, but it definitely has the funky, cool, almost like James Brown showman sort of thing going on here, and Steven's kind of like a clown on it. It's really cool that way as well. Okay, that's my 4 and 3.
Cool. All right, number 4 for me is a title track from Nine Lives.
Yeah.
Just again, slashing guitars all over the place. I like Joey's drumming on this one. I agree with it. There's not enough cymbals and hi-hats, but I think overall his playing sounds really good. It doesn't sound as boxy as some of the other drum performances on some of these other albums. But
Yeah.
and I think Tyler's just like screaming up a storm on this song. It's just again, when Tyler's got all that energy and that piss and vinegar, I'm interested. So title track from Nine Lives, and number 3, I'm gonna go with Fever from Get a Grip. Again, it's got that attitude. It's got those guitars, the nasty guitars. The drums are kind of simple, but they're effective on this song. And I love the chorus. To me, maybe ditch the harmonica, but everybody would expect me to say that, of course, knowing my love for harmonica. But yeah, otherwise, I think Fever is a great, great song. It's always been probably my, if not my favorite song, one of my favorite songs from Get a Grip. So yeah, Nine Lives and Fever, 4 and 3.
Nice. Well, we've had a lot of variety. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 2 is Don't Stop from the Living on the Edge single. This is a really good rocker. It's up tempo. I think it's got the best punchy recording. It's got proper hi-hat in it. It's just a good, dare I say, heavy metal sort of song. And so, yeah, that's the other cool thing about Aerosmith is, I once did an exercise thinking I'd write an article on or whatever. I got it in my computer somewhere, but this long, long list of Aerosmith songs that didn't make the albums, right? They work so hard that it extends past the album itself into other songs that clearly they worked hard on. I mean, none of that stuff sounds like demos at all, right? It's just that they're just super polished, completely finished sort of songs. And then I'm gonna close off with the song that starts off this whole regretful era of Aerosmith, "Eat the Rich," opening track on Get a Grip. Just a good rocker. And again, just one that sort of proves their songwriting prowess because it's just so hooky you can't get it out of your head. But it's a no nonsense rocker, except there's a lot of nonsense even on the production. It's just the epitome of this sort of overproduced, what are those sounds going on thing, where it's almost like they're building a replicant of guitar, bass, and drums with a bunch of clever instruments, sort of things and effects, right? I mean, you hear of these sessions where they're bringing in all sorts of stuff all the time with Aerosmith. It's a long drawn out affair. So there you go. Don't Stop, non-LP track, and Eat the Rich.
Cool. All right, my last 2 are both from Get a Grip. My number 2 is Living on the Edge.
Okay.
Agree with everything you said. It's a really different song for them. I think it really works. It's really catchy. The chorus is great. I like the jangly guitars on this. I'm not always a fan of that style of guitar in Aerosmith material, but I think it works here. I think the backing vocals are really nicely layered, and it's I liked it when it came out. I think I like it even more these days, and it's an example of them doing something completely different, and it really, really works. Really works. And they didn't go back to this well again. Good, bad, or ugly, right? But yeah, that's my number 2. And then also number 1, Eat the Rich. That's right. Nasty riff, tons of groove, and more importantly, it's got the balls of classic Aerosmith. To me, it's by far the best song from this era. I think, you hear Eat the Rich, you're thinking, yeah, these guys are back. Maybe not quite, but it just has all the attitude of classic Aerosmith, and the chorus is amazing, and it just kicks off, like you said, that era, that album, and this era with a bang. And maybe they don't quite match it for the rest of their output during the time since, but it's still a great song. I think it needs to be mentioned with some of the great Aerosmith songs of all time. So yeah, Living on the Edge and Eat the Rich, number 2 and 1.
Yeah, it's a what if sort of thing, and this band is not a particularly playful or creative band this way. But imagine if they were still going and they all of a sudden decided, yeah, we're going to agree with all the fans and say all these albums were greatly overproduced and too much. And so here's our album of 12, not even 12, 11 of these great songs redone with a Rocks production, right? And
Yeah.
and just like yeah, that would have been amazing, right? But other bands do things like that, but Aerosmith, it's just too big a
I even
corporation.
thought, they went and did that blues album, right? Honkin' and
Yeah,
and that was supposed to be this kind of stripped back, just play some
yeah,
blues covers and whatnot. I even find that pretty overproduced.
yeah.
Not
And
all
I
that.
even went, I had to go play the one song they wrote on it to see, oh, that's gonna make my list. The Grind. No, it's not
No,
gonna make my list. Because I can't stand a slow, boring blues kind of thing, right?
it's
So
just not that interesting. I mean, that's the
yeah,
problem. It's even as a blues. I mean, I have no issue with the blues, but as a blues song, it's not very good, which is a
yeah,
shame.
yeah,
So, it's funny. You look at like, when the Stones did that a couple of years ago, right, where they released that album of blues covers and whatnot. That actually was pretty lively and fun. And I don't
mm,
get that from the Aerosmith album. And I remember how much they touted that when that was coming out. Oh, people are
yeah.
gonna love this back to basic Aerosmith and whatnot. We were all kind of like, really? That's it? That's what you got? Oof.
Yeah.
No thanks.
I've got my advanced version of that, honking on Bobo. And then I've got my where I don't know where the proper CD went, but I've got my squished box of it, right? Because
Oh,
it came in
jeez.
this thing with the little with the harmonica, right?
Harmonica, yep, yep.
Yeah. So yeah, again, just like music for another dimension. Like, where do you put these pieces of these things, right? Oh yeah, there it is. There's the CD that came in the box,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Or looking,
With that harmonica.
even that reminds me of pictures of Def Leppard, right? When you put
Yeah.
these bands in suits trying to say, oh, look how classy we are, kind of thing. Look how upscale we are. It always kind of turns me off, right?
Yeah.
So even that's got a Def Leppard look to it, right?
I mean, if you're doing like a blues covers albums, right? You shouldn't be wearing suits. The old bluesmen weren't wearing suits most of the time, right?
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
well, Martin, as we close up the year here, what's going on with you over the next 2 weeks on the Contrarians and the podcast? And you have any books coming out before the end of the year? Or are you done till
No,
2020?
I think we're all kind of winded down. We had a real crazy weird album cover show, and I think that took the stuffing out of us. So we're gonna take a 2 week break there as well. And yeah, I think I've mailed the last of the books that people are expecting for Christmas. That's for sure. But I got a little mailing to do. But yeah, martinpopoff.com for the books. I am keeping up history in 5 songs because I don't want to break the that's my audio podcast, right? So I don't want to break the spell of never missing a week on that. I'm up to
That's right.
287 editions of that. And we've got our ACDC one with John Gaffney. We just knocked off another one of those on the Highway to Hell album. So that's also with Pantheon. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay, cool. So Martin and I will be back on January 3rd, right after the new year. We've already got a topic set, so we're going to be kind of talking about it for those of you who like to get your list together before you actually see the show. We're going to be talking about these bands that were formed from other bands, right? So whether we haven't figured out what exactly we're going to call it, offshoot band, the remnant bands, right? These bands that formed from other bigger bands, and we're going to be picking out our 10 favorites of those type of groups and talk about some of those albums. So that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Coming up here on the channel, we've got the Professor's Picks this afternoon. I believe also the final episode of the year. Ken's got a lot to talk about. So get a drink ready, get some popcorn, and get ready to hear about some of these end of the year releases that are coming out right about now. We've got Jamie Laszlo and the review crew coming up tomorrow. Again, putting a final touch to 2024, talking about some of their favorite releases of the year. I will be ranking the albums of very cool new wave of traditional heavy metal band Enforcer on Sunday. And then hopefully on Monday, I should have my episode of top 50 albums of 2024 up on the channel. And then we've got one more in the prog seat, also talking about our favorite prog albums of the year. And that's basically going to put a cap on the year. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in 2025 here at the Funhouse.
Absolutely.
For
Merry
Martin
Christmas.
Popoff, I'm
Yeah.
Pete Pardo. Enjoy your holidays, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.